Hi, welcome to the Roadside Stand. A Roadside Stand, which is a poem in the Flamingo textbook of CBSE Class 12 English. So, the detailed explanation video is on this channel. Please look at it. It is a complicated poem. Okay, it is a complicated poem. So, you need to kind of pay attention to every word, every line. This one is a revision video in which I'm going to talk about the 10 main points as far as this particular poem is concerned. Okay, so what exactly is a roadside stand all about? Before I start, just want to remind you that the CUET test papers are on studywithsudhir.com website, which will help you prepare if you are taking the examination. If you aspire to go to Delhi University like I did, then please come here to test yourself as far as English is concerned. I would also be doing some videos on for CUET English, but these test papers will essentially prepare you because that's going to be online also. So you will get tuned to how to actually prepare yourself as far as the examination is concerned. So this is something which you can definitely look at. Quality is assured. Okay. Now, what exactly is the poem all about? Now, it is a poignant. Poignant means slightly on the emotional side. Critique means taking a very critical look. He does not mince words. The poet does not mince words. He says things as they are, right? Of the economic divide between the urban rich and the rural poor. Robert Frost focuses on the harsh social and economic realities of the countryside as they exist in America. What is the theme of the poem? The theme of the poem is the struggle. Now, this kind of a paragraph will help you because these are the kind of words you should include in your 40 to 50 word or 120 to 150 word answer. The theme of the poem is the struggle and the helplessness of the rural people who are forced to sell their goods on the roadside to make a living, to earn some money, and the indifference being very important, and exploitation they face from city dwellers and government agencies. Both of them are out to exploit them. They are indifferent to the plight that they face. So there is that economic divide between the rural poor and the urban rich, and it is very visible even in the optics, the flashy cars, etc., and the way this particular stand actually looks. So what is the setting of the poem? The setting of the poem is in a rural part of America, right? This is what the illustration is actually showing. It is set in a rural area, and the speaker is a farmer who has set up a roadside stand to sell his produce, whatever he's producing in terms of vegetables and fruits, etc. However, the cars that pass by on this particular road, that pass by on the highway rarely stop, and the farmer is forced to beg for customers. He even offers to sell his goods for free, but the city dwellers are indifferent to his plight. Now, what are the different elements of this particular poem? That is something which you need to know, so that when after you have revised, it will really help you understand. The poem is full of images of poverty and despair. The farmer's house is small and weather-beaten, and his wife is worn out with work. The produce that he sells is cheap and common. I have put all the keywords in quotes, and the only people who stop to buy it are a few poor people. These are the different elements of the poem. Then, the poem also criticizes the government's indifference to the plight of rural people in America. The speaker says that the government has built a road by here, but has not built us a house. He also says that the government has passed a law that allows people to pick wild berries for free, which has hurt his business. So there are a lot of details and different elements in this poem which you need to know, which you need to understand, which you need to remember, so that you can include it if you get a question which asks you to substantiate with elements from the poem, which is why the details I'm putting it out here so that you are able to recall and include it in your answers. How does the poem end? The poem ends with the speaker expressing his frustration and despair. He says that he is tired of begging and he wishes he were dead. The poem is a powerful indictment. Indictment means sharp criticism of the exploitation of rural people and the indifference of the government to their plight. Now, let me just go through the poem in 10 points. A small little house has extended its porch to create a roadside stand. It is not begging for a dole of bread. Please look at all these words which I have included in double quotes, these are the keywords, which means charity, but for a small share of the city money that supports the luxurious life of urban dwellers, means people who live in the cities. The polished traffic, the city folk drive by in their expensive cars, referred to as polished traffic. They represent a refined but indifferent class. They may be rich, their cars may be very posh, they may look very rich and refined, but they're largely indifferent to the plight of the poor people. They rarely stop, and when they do, it is only to complain about the scenery. Then, nature versus commercialism. The passers-by feel the landscape marred by the poorly painted signs of the stand. They focus on the aesthetic, artless paint rather than the desperate human need behind the stall. This is an extremely important point. The farmers sell simple, soul-nourishing items. 1 minute, let me just. If you just see the language itself, the polished traffic passed with the mind ahead, or if ever aside a moment, then out of sorts at having the landscape marred with the artless paint. So the kind of, I want you to use these kind of keywords and key phrases in your answers. Crooked neck, gold squash, these represent the honest raw produce of the land. Then the bitterness of the poor. The rural folk tell the rich to keep their money, keep your money if you are going to be mean spirited about it. Their hurt is not about the money itself, but about the trusting sorrow, the disappointment of being ignored by fellow human beings. Then Robert Frost also criticizes the social reformers and politicians in the second half of the poem who promise to relocate rural people to theater and store areas. He calls them beneficent beasts of prey. Very, very powerful phrase. Definitely include it in your answer, especially if you get a 120, 150 word question, who pretend to help but actually aim to exploit the poor for their own gain, right? Then, calculated exploitation. These do-gooders encourage the poor to stop thinking for themselves, essentially soothing them out of their wits so that the city can continue to profit from their displacement. Then the poet describes the childish longing of the stand owner who sits by the window all day praying for the squeal of brakes and the sound of a stopping car. And this is something, if you ever step out of the city and go into the countryside, this is something which you will find even in India, that people are desperate to sell their wares and they keep waiting. Haven't you seen on the highway people selling some berries, people selling guava, which are freshly plucked from the trees and wanting to sell it to you? They are waiting. And we are generally very indifferent. We don't kind of think, because we generally think, oh, if we stop, they will actually hike the prices, sell it to you for a profit. But they are also trying to make a living. And that is what this particular poem essentially conveys. What about the false hopes? Most cars only stop to use the yard to turn around, only to reverse, right? To ask for directions or ask if they sell gas, which obviously they don't. This highlights the disconnect between the two. Frost expresses a radical momentary thought that it would be a great relief to put these suffering people at one stroke out of their pain. However, he quickly regains his senses because there is a violent streak that comes to his mind, but then he decides to correct himself, realizing the complexity of their struggle. Now, let us look at some questions and answers. This came in the CBSE question bank of 2021. The roadside stand and the moving cars are a contrast around which the entire poem is woven. Expound. Expound means explain in detail. So, just look at this answer. In the poem, the roadside stand and the moving cars are a contrast that is woven throughout the entire poem. The stand represents the old traditional way of life in the countryside, while the cars represent the fast-paced modern world of the city. Point number one. The stand is described as pathetically pled. I've used quotes from the poem, right? Suggesting that it is not a pretty sight. It does not look very beautiful. The signs advertising its wares have artless paints of signs which are defaced with N written wrong and S turned wrong. In contrast, the traffic is described as polished with a mind ahead. The cars are also described as going somewhere without casting a look at the roadside stand. The cars that are always on the move, they have a mind of their own. They are always on the move, are a symbol of the fast-paced modern life of the city, in contrast to the slow-paced life of the countryside, which is almost stationary. Thama hua hai. There is a ठहराव, right? whereas at the fast-paced life of the city is always on the move, trying to catch up, symbolized by the static roadside stand. Now, there is also the tension between tradition and progress. This is a long answer, so I've given you all the details. The poem explores the profound tension between tradition and progress. The roadside stand symbolizes the past and the old ways which the people running it are desperately trying to hold on to. However, they are being relentlessly swept away by the tide of progress, represented by the moving cars and the encroaching city. So you see the city has kind of encroached into the roadside stand. You see the roadside stand on in a corner here, but the city is like a demon, like a devil, which is coming in and taking over the entire city. In a few years, this side also will be full of glitzy buildings like this. The visual, I hope, is able to convey what the point Robert Frost is making. This progress, while symbolizing the future, also signifies a significant loss of community and connection with the land. Even the do-gooders, under the guise of help, aim to deprive them of their land, and that includes the government as well. So this connection with the land will soon be lost to this roadside stand. Second question: for what purpose do the cars stop if they do near the roadside stand? Now, this is a simple kind of a question. Most cars do not stop near the roadside stand. The poet mentioned 3 cars that stopped but had nothing to do with what the stand was actually selling. One car used the farmer's yard to back and turn around. It furrowed on the grass and drove away. Another one stopped to ask for directions. A third one wanted to buy a gallon of petrol, which obviously the roadside stand did not sell. And the speaker is particularly angry with this person who does not even bother to know what the stand sells before asking for fuel. This illustrates the speaker's frustration with the indifference of the city dwellers who pass by the roadside stand. Question number 3. What is the childish longing and the sadness that lurks that the poet refers to? Why is it referred to as vain? Childish longing in vain refers to the futile expectation of rural folk for city money. Sadness that lurks is the suffering that is endured while waiting for a customer to appear. It is in vain because the cars are described as selfish, important, and do not stop to buy products from roadside shops or only make inquiries which have got nothing to do with the roadside stand. The poor people's futile expectation for city money has been compared to children's longing for things beyond their reach. Sadness has been personified as it lies in wait near the open window, listening to the squeal of brakes, and praying for a city customer to arrive and inquire and be interested in the products that they are selling. Now, this came in the specimen paper 2024. And this is, again, it's a combination of 2 poems. Imagine that you are Pablo Neruda, the poet of Keeping Quiet. What advice might you offer to Robert Frost, the poet of Roadside Stand, in the context of his conflicted emotions as displayed in the given lines? Okay, these are the lines. Pen down your advice. This is how you will need to start. This is how you will end. Okay, so this is what is given. So the answer that I have written is, I recently read your poem and was struck by its conflicted emotions. It is clear that you are deeply concerned about the plight of the people who run the roadside stand. You see their pain and suffering, and you want to help them. However, you are also conflicted about what to do. You know that it would be a great relief to end their pain, but you also know that it would be wrong to take their lives. It's a difficult situation and there is no answer. So he's kind of empathizing with the with the mind of Robert Frost. My advice to you is to continue to write about this experience. Poetry can be a powerful tool for exploring complex emotions as well as connecting with others who are struggling with similar issues. Secondly, I would encourage you to talk to someone you trust about your feelings. A therapist or a counselor can help you to process your emotions and to develop healthy coping mechanisms. They can also help you to make decisions about what to do about the situation. Finally, remember, you are not alone. There are many people who are struggling with similar issues. There are also many resources available to help you. I hope this advice is helpful to you. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do to support you. This is how it was supposed to end, Pablo Neruda. So why I have included this? Because in case you get a question like this, which if you are not prepared for a question like this, it can leave you a little surprised. Arey, ab iska kaise answer likhna hai? So I want you to be fully prepared for all kinds of googly questions. This came in the specimen paper of 2024. So it's quite possible that a question of this kind of format, mixing up 2 poems, 2 poets, can actually be asked in the examination. Okay, with this, we have ended the entire set of literature, poems, essays, and stories. All the revision videos, including answers, questions and answers, are there on this channel. The explanation videos are on this channel. So please make use of them. if you are interested in understanding in simple English instead of understanding in Hindi and then trying to translate it in the examination hall. Tata, bye bye. All the best to you. Thank you very much. My blessings. Bye.